Welcome to Transmissions from Yonder Shore, a podcast for the mythic seeker at the liminal edge.
Hey, welcome everyone to the From Yonder Shore podcast. I'm your guide, misfit, mystic, Chris Kaplan. With me today is transpersonal astrologer Eric Meyers, author of numerous astrology books. Some of my favorite books: Astrology Awakening, Volumes 1 and 2, Elements and Evolution, Between Past and Presence, and most recently, The Spiritual Dimension of the Beatles, which is like a super awesome treatise on the astrology of the Beatles. So today we're gonna discuss not only things of astrology, but all things writing, flow states, where we glean insight and inspiration as authors, the creative well, where even works of nonfiction truly pull from. There's nothing with that spiritual well, to be honest. Like, it's where I feel like everything kind of like gleans and comes from. And if we have time, we're gonna dive into some of my favorite author charts. Maybe a few of Eric's as well, but I didn't warn him ahead of time of that. So we're gonna jump in and flow. And Eric, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on, and it's great to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I so look forward to discussing the writing process, which to me is so much more my interest than anything to do with marketing or publicity. Yeah. I'm not very business oriented and interested in those things. I am very interested in the creative process, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So
yeah, I'm glad you were down to rap about it, because it's so much fun. We're both writers. And I noticed too, there's so many brilliant writers, even just in like astrological community. Never really get to hear about like what really pulls us to write and to communicate that way. And for me, I'm biased. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite medium. And there's just something to just being able to drop into that stream of consciousness.
What I think, what I've come to understand is, and this is Uranus Aquarius, is that we are connected to a larger brain. We are like nerve endings of a larger brain. And we're not taught this when we are growing up.
Yeah.
We are taught that everything that's going on in your skull is you. But actually, we are conduits. We are receptors, nerve endings of a bigger brain. And so what I have learned is I previously thought that everything I was thinking was original, but it's not. It's coming from a much larger eternal mind. We have the ability to be in partnership with this mind. And most of us are doing that all the time, but we don't realize it. And we think that we are just thinking our own thoughts.
Yeah, like these are like our own ego-based sort of like inspirations, and like all this insight is. But it's.
So one of the great quotes I've heard about that is Stephen King, who is asked all the time, "Where do you get all of your wonderfully creative ideas?" And he has said, he's written, they're not my ideas. He says, "I'm an archaeologist." Basically, I
love that.
I go and I discover things and I dust them off and I polish them and I present them with my own unique little personality spin on it. But those ideas are part of something beyond me, is what he's saying. And he goes, and I'm just kind of digging like an archaeologist, and I find things. And then I refine them and polish them. And I like that metaphor, that we just need to kind of discover, which is to discard the cover, meaning that it's already there. There's nothing new.
Yeah.
It's just new to you. We are uncovering parts of this colossal big mind that we're part of. And then we can share, we can polish it, we can put our individual spin on it. but we have access to something amazing. Just are
Totally.
not aware of it.
Absolutely. That's the key, like waking up to that kind of knowledge of it. And that's something like I forget about that metaphor King brings up, but it's something that like so many authors and artists bring up where it's like, it's not coming from you. This story spoke to me. We're kind of like channeling it. We're just letting it kind of like organically tell itself through the writing process. It's like almost like going through fog. I mean, for me, it's like going through fog a little bit where you have a seed of an idea and like, oh, it wants to go here. But then it's like, ooh, what's going on over here? And it kind of takes its own kind of organic life. And it's not coming for you. And so many of these insights that you have, whether it's like visionary states, shamanic states, are all kind of tapping into this well that's there, whether source, whatever name you want to call it. It was like the great dreamer, you know, because everything, I'm very Piscean. I like dream states and
Yeah.
flowing of consciousness, you know. But that seems to be the one universal that any author can kind of agree on, is that it's like, oh, well, it just kind of came to me, or it's there, you know. It's not coming from me personally. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and the amazing thing about it is not only do we have access to this
Right.
broader intelligence, but we actually have a map of it. You have your own chart, you have
Yeah.
your own relationship to it. This could be understood, and the timing of it, of when you're
Yeah.
having certain transits or progressions, when you might be more available for that partnership.
Yeah, it's really
And-
funny and synchronous. I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
go
I
ahead.
have to get into it because it's the idea that came to me the other, just like before we hopped on here about author charts. But Philip K. Dick, that very prolific science fiction author, would talk about this. Valis was the vast acting living intelligence system, you know, beaming satellites and transmissions down to like, that's where all the insight and gnosis comes from this like external sort of source that we all have connection to. And I just like, that's just synchronistically perfect, you know?
Yes. And right now, as you are aware, the planet Uranus, which has a lot to do with all of this, recently entered the sign of Gemini and will be in the sign of ideas and writing for the next 7 years. This is the premier time to be able to connect your little mind, so to speak, with the big mind and have a partnership to create things from the Noösphere, as many have called it.
Yeah.
Nuos is mind,
Yeah.
and the sphere of mind that we are all part of. So this goes along with the archetype Uranus, that does go with Aquarius. This is what Aquarius is about: the interconnectedness of all thought in what we might call the Noösphere. So we all have a relationship with this, and we could all discover things, uncover it, and present them. I think narcissism comes in when people think that they're the ones creating.
It's true. It's totally true.
And that's Leo, which is the opposite of Aquarius, if you think that you're the creative genius. But here's the partnership, is that spirit and this big mind needs personalities and separation consciousness to partner with. So it's perfectly fine to put your name on something and to claim authorship of something and to present it in this unique way. But we know it's actually a broader partnership.
Totally, a broader partnership, and it is like it gets filtered through that personal lens, you know, whatever that language system is for us, our cultural background, which is so much of that domain of Leo, of like what the unique light that shines, right? And I think like so much of that's become, you know, a large part of the dialogue with Pluto going into Aquarius, right? You had to go rectify the shadow element, the polarity of Leo, where we started to like over-identify with any which thing. Like, I thought it was fascinating the last like several years, really, or attaching onto labels and be like, what makes us completely unique? Whereas as we're starting to realize that we're more and more becoming part of this collective seeing, collective image, where the self is starting to get dissipated a little bit, but it's, you know, where do you find that water in a drop of the ocean type of thing? You know?
Yeah. So there is a real central point that I want to make about this process that takes some time to understand and experience. The energy of Uranus, Aquarius, is very fast. And the so-called eureka moment or the aha moment, when you just know. Think about when you turn on the light switch. It just gets light pretty quickly. It just, boom, it's light.
Instantaneous.
Instantaneous. So the way to understand when we are receiving something is the quickness. All of a sudden, you just have this moment of aha, you just get it.
Yeah.
It's just like it's already instantaneously complete and it just arrives. And a lot of people who are connecting with this inspiration say the same thing. For example, when I wrote the Beatles book, both Lennon and McCartney did receive songs this way, and they talked about it at length. And both of them said the same thing. Paul McCartney received Yesterday in a dream. John Lennon received Across the Universe. They both said the same thing. It came to me already fully formed. I didn't have to develop the chord structure. I didn't have to develop anything. It was just more or less, how do I get it down, because it was already fully formed. And both of them had the same kind of saying. They said, am I plagiarizing? I didn't come up with this. Where did I get it from? Why was it fully formed? How come I didn't have to do any development of it? Was part of their process when they received these songs from the ethers. And that is the kind of quality of instantaneous eureka. You don't really need to develop it. It's already there. But then the work is to ground it. The work is to honor it by polishing it and grounding it and honoring it without distorting it.
Right. It must be a midwife to it to be born too, going through that kind of navigating stewardship process.
Yeah. But I wanted to mention that could be one of the signals that you're receiving something, is the immediacy of it and how it just seems to just turn on and you just get it all of a sudden.
Yeah, and get that jolt of inspiration. Like it's kind of like that that joy, that heart activation, like you get like, oh wow, and then it's just kind of rejuvenates, it energizes your whole body into like go right into it. I know with Uranus being a Gemini, I always say now more than ever, carry that notebook, even use your voice memos, like tap down everything, because the thoughts are just gonna be, and insights are just flying through, especially depending on unique chart signatures and what have you, where you're just gonna be just lit up like a good God, what were those little light brights?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Oh man, those things were fantastic.
And so a lot of times people question things because they're not as aware that they're receiving something, and they question it. What was that? Is that real? Oh, that must have been a blip. And people discard their intuitive flashes all the time. They don't trust it. So part of the way that we can be more in this partnership is through sitting meditation or stillness and breathing and just cultivating space and silence and see what comes in. Now, also to use astrology, you can also time your meditation or with a transit or a time of day. Every day, all of the planets go around the chart.
Right.
And you can time, for instance, the 12th house is a time or an area where we're divinely receptive, and when there's a lot going on in the 12th house, you can sit and meditate and be receptive to what's going on. So you can use astrology, for intuitive reasons.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even down to the planetary hours that you mentioned. I know one thing of meditation and any sort of going into a flow state was always paramount. Like for me personally, I always had two different kind of modalities of writing. It's downloading that new kind of first draft insight from whatever kind of intelligence system that is, and kind of transcribing that. Right. When that can be, usually it's in the deep of night. I can light up a joint, get into that flow state and just, really just channel and like let it kind of come out. Right. Then the other side of it, which so much of feel like is the midwifing process, the birthing process of it, is the editing process. Right. So I love to wake up fresh in the morning, brew a pot of Wayusa, the occasional coffee, and really just like dial it in. It's very sober, but it's very clear minded. And there's just another form of narrative of kind of playing with that kind of transmission in a way,
Yeah, I view it the same way, Chris.
Yeah,
I've talked about it as the creative process, which is everything we're talking about. And then the editing, polishing, refinement process, which I'm not as crazy about, but the product is gratifying. And then after that is the getting the word out, marketing and things of that,
I hear you on that one. I could
which
take
is
it or
even
leave
less
it on that.
of a passion of mine.
Yeah, because we're inspired now. We want to go, download the next transmission, so to speak.
Right. So I'm so glad that you and I are talking about this today because I love the creative process and I have written a few books, but I've been so demoralized and challenged by the other things we mentioned,
Yeah,
the business stuff that these last few years have not been
right.
very productive. I've been overwhelmed by those things and dispirited by them. And so right now I'm actually shifting to reinvesting into that creative process, synchronous with talking with you.
That's beautiful.
And then everything later will take care of itself.
Yeah, I really feel like it does. Like, and that's, part of the work is like, in our job is to kind of download and swim in those seas, and really get the message to transmit, right? That's like such a vital step. And that's not everyone's forte, everyone has a unique balance with that too, where they even struggle with that, with shutting up the mind and really listening in and trusting that flow of inspiration, intuition. That's not intuitive for everyone. We're very watery. I know your chart and my chart, we're very watery, so we can swim in those seas, which is very beautiful.
There's another thing I want to say about the writing process, because I have talked with many people over the years about the challenges of writing. And I've been challenged myself these last few years and working through some of this challenge. So I'm teaching what I'm also learning myself.
I appreciate it.
So here's the point I want to make is a lot of people they look at a book and they'd be like, oh my God, all of those words, that is a monumental task. Well, here's what I tell people. One page is roughly, 4 paragraphs or so. And if you could just write one page a day for a year, you will have a 365-page book at the end of a year.
Yeah.
Which is pretty substantial. So some days you're going to write more. Some days you might not write at all. But if you could just on average write 4 or 5 paragraphs, you could write a book in a year.
Thank you for bringing that up too, because that is something that gets crippling. We, can't separate the forest from the trees, and we're always looking at the end goal. And it's like, oh God, I have so much to say, so much to convey. But like when we're starting any sort of journey, like you really just have to take it step by step. That's the only way to get there. And that's like if you go paragraph by paragraph, that's fantastic, And just that starting off. For me, that's one thing I do like about that first creative process is that you can be really loose with it and just start writing any nonsense down and you get into the flow. And then there you go. Then a page pumping out on a page. And it's just start, just like jump in. Like the water is okay. It's cold. It's like, you just got to jump in.
So there's 2 points about that. That I want to make. The one point is about building momentum, which I haven't fully re-established yet, and I'm about to, is that once you get momentum, just like when you are riding a bike and you build momentum and it carries you. So if you start writing every day, and let's say you only get 1,000 words or what have you, fine, it builds, and do that for a week or two and it builds momentum and it becomes a lot more smooth and easy to get back into it, and you're building on what you just did. So momentum gathers is an important point. The other point to pick up on what you're saying is my advice to people when you're in the creative process is don't worry at all about making it refined and polished. Just get the content down. Exactly. Some of the hardest part of the writing process is bringing things from the Noösphere, the realm of mind, down on the earth plane, on typewriters or computer screen or writing tablets or whatever it is. Is simply what I call get it down. Don't worry about sentence structure, grammar. Don't worry about anything like that. Just honor the creative ideas.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I do prefer. Like my first drafts, I write on legal pads. Like I like the computers off. I don't have the light on the screen. And it's something like I can write in candlelight or take it wherever I'm in the middle of the forest. And I just want to sit down and write. And there's, something, for me, I like the tactile sort of sensory of you can smell the ink and the wood pulp and things like that. but it just helps to just like I can write a lot faster by hand than I can typing, me personally, so I'm just like, scribbling down. I do have the problem though. Sometimes I can't read my handwriting, so I am laboring to transcribe those pages. But it's a little, it's like a short edit doing it that way too. But absolutely, I totally agree. You have to just dive in and let it kind of flow. And back to your bicycle metaphor, once you get momentum going too, it's like the bikes, if you start slowing down and stopping, that's when you sort of tip over. It's like you keep motion going, you keep that momentum going. And soon enough, you look back and you've written a book and it's like, wow, like where did that come from? I thought it was like just writing, an hour a day, which is, fantastic. I my cap is like 5 pages an hour. And I drop down after that. I'm like, okay, that was a good session. And then the world shuts off. It's good. But
yeah, that's very good.
I have that Mercury, Jupiter natally. And my problem is, I'm great at expanding things. And then I have to work the reverse and trim things
right down. That's the challenge. So the creative process, I want to say a couple more things about that, is I began my first book, it was a long time ago now, around 2001.
And was that the Uranus book or the Sagittarius book?
It was called The Arrow's Ascent, Astrology and the Quest for Meaning. I don't publicize it. It was just me becoming a writer.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But mainly, here's what happened that I want to mention, is that at the time, many years ago, I was working night shifts at Boulder Community Hospital. I worked nights 3 nights a week. And being in that liminal zone between sleep and wake is extremely fertile to connecting into the Noösphere, should we call it that. And some people might hear this recording or they say, sometimes I get so tired. Well, that's the time when you're fertile, when you are tired.
Yeah.
So don't worry about actual writing with grammar and syntax and all of that. Again, That's for later. That's for the next process. Is that what I encourage? If you're exhausted, just rest and close your eyes and go into a meditation and get a little voice recorder and just give your thoughts of what comes in and just speak to what your consciousness is involved in. And it can be a very rich process being exhausted, or before you go to bed, or when you wake up in the morning, or you can even, track the dreams. And right when you wake up, that is coming straight from that area. So there's actually a real gift with fatigue and
torturing yourself.
Right. Is that we actually are very connected. When we're not so jacked up on caffeine and everything and in the left brain. When you're in the right brain intuitive spaces, there's a lot of richness in there.
Absolutely. And one thing with tapping into that liminal noosphere space, please continue. I completely lost my point for that.
No, that was the whole point. Is I recommend getting some kind of voice recorder or something, or even on phones these days. There's message. Yeah. You could just hit to record a message. Is have something available just to capture the fleeting intuitive sparks, because if you don't capture them, they often then you forget them.
One thing about tapping into those liminal spheres, going into silence and meditation to really go into those wells, clear that, the monkey brain chatter, of the ego chatter, whether it's the end of the day, we're usually carrying so much with us. For me, when it is an end of the day, nighttime sort of creative process, I really like it when, the world is sort of asleep. It's late night. It's usually midnight type of thing. And I shut the phone down, everything sort of down and really kind of slip into that stream. And on the reverse, like waking up fresh and weary out, especially if you wake up before the world wakes up, you're kind of like have this kind of segue into that liminal waking stage, that pre-dawn moment, and that the dream realm is so ripe. A lot of times inspiration comes from the dream realm, which is another thing. But there was one point I wanted to bring up that just to remind me back to like the plant metaphors again. And when you were talking about the Beatles, when you were talking about sort of like trying to own authorship of songs coming through from those stages. And it's something you see, like, we were tapping into like the collective unconscious, where like any one ideas or the themes that may be, paramount at the time, we're all kind of swimming in, we're all downloading and tapping into that. And you so often see like where like, oh, well, I had this idea, this person ripped me off, like it was my idea, and that kind of thing. And I feel like plants, it's like those ideas are getting seeded like all over the place just to make sure that that idea sort of survives and has the ability to kind of take root and blossom.
There is a lot of examples where independently people, unbeknownst to each other, arrive at similar ideas around the same time.
Yeah.
And the reason that happens is because, in my view, the astrology is ready for that to become much more available, for the collective. So I like the idea that turns everything on its head. Instead of people who generate ideas, ideas are out there looking for people.
Right. Just that receiver needs to be turned on. So much reminds me of like when McKenna was talking about mushrooms too, just like beaming that transmission there. And if anyone can kind of tap into that,
Right. Ideas need people. And so you can see that could be various people who say, okay, I can partner with these ideas. And then they are doing their current astrology. Somebody else is doing it.
Right.
And they come up with the same thing because they're both attuning, to the astrology, the work at any given time at the same time. So I love it when that happens. And you also see that when you're in sync with people.
Yeah.
You can finish each other's thoughts. There is a psychic connection that we have when we're in alignment and attuned.
Yeah.
That's the issue. Most of the time, we're not in alignment and attuned. So
or just so unconsciously,
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of those things that get us out of alignment. And, obviously, your own mood. Like for me, these last few years, I've been, in a challenging process for complicated reasons and not very much attuned to the creative process. If you have grief, unresolved emotions, if you're not in your center, then it's more difficult to be in alignment. So health reasons, mental health, physical health, or otherwise. And then there can also be, attuning your own frequency.
Yeah.
If we're using a lot of drugs and alcohol, that can dim your energy. You can have, while you're under the influence, have big bursts of opening and awakening. But if we are constantly hungover or smoking a lot of pot or other substances, it does dim your frequency in general. So my suggestion, based on my experience, is you mentioned, I think, lighting a joint and going, that could be enhancing. But if you are always lighting a joint,
exactly.
And that is your disposition 24/7, then it's not going to, be helpful.
Yeah, it totally depends on your relationship with it. For me, something with that, it's a very kind of like a sacred act,
Yes.
So when diving into it, it's like it's almost like any kind of like muscle memory when you're creating this kind of container and something that you're always using almost like in a ritualistic fashion for it. Totally different than that complete blanketing, dulling, and state of being. Not to be judgmental of that. Sometimes people need to be in that state as well.
No judgment from me either. It's just that all I'm saying from experience is overdoing it is not helpful.
Agreed.
But doing it intentional, like you mentioned, saying a prayer, lighting a candle, having sacredness with that for a creative process, that can be very intentional. But overuse of things in my view, is not going to be helpful. It does dim your vibration when you are constantly hungover.
Absolutely. And it's ironic too, because it's always like all the writers, you just have to be, a drunk, depressed human being, always hitting the bottle to get your inspiration. And that's the wildest thing. Like, if the rare times I'm actually having a drink is because I know, like, I'm not writing today. So there we are. It's one thing, there are exceptions. Sometimes you need like the occasional curveball that comes in. That's almost like this complete 180 thing that can jump. But then we're talking, those are two different things. But when you're kind of relying on that, especially something like alcohol, that is a depressant, and it kind of creates that kind of muddled layer. I never really kind of wed those two things, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. So attuning your own consciousness and
exactly.
And managing the creative process intentionally.
Like, you and I are aware of those channels and those conduits, and like anything like that kind of can interfere with that. So like if we're kind of relying on that, it does dull the sense memory and the ability to really tap into those, the Noösphere, those universal realms and the morphogenic fields and the different, planetary consciousness, and we're, always tapped into.
Yeah. And then to give voice to the other part of the process is we have the creative process, and then we have the polishing process. And the polishing process is completely different.
Yeah.
And that, it's not necessary to engage in such a sacred, intuitive process.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, the polishing process, just to be blunt about it, in the morning, I brew coffee and I have one serving of coffee. And I do think the first 3 hours after a cup of coffee, you are quicker, you are more alert. And, for me, and I'm not advocating using caffeine, and this is what I do. People do whatever they want.
Yeah, you can do anything, even open some warm beverage, open the airways and the pathways. And
so that focus and clarity and crispness is for the polishing process, but you don't need to be that for the creative process.
Right. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Right.
I know that for speaking from experience too. Love that crispness, and that's the perfect word for it, because it really is. There's this, the morning awakening, this bright sunlight. For me, it's like I also, I enjoy reading, so it's like reading with my morning cup of coffee, or tea and what have you. And it really just dials in, like there's something super fresh about it. But then it kind of dissipates. The world wakes up. The activities of the day call you away. I really struggle with saying, like, if I'm going to go into that editing process in the middle of the day, can't do it. It has to be the morning for me.
I agree. And everyone's different. There's no universal script.
Yeah.
But I do find, and I encourage, the polishing process is probably best when you're fresh and sharp in the morning. For me, having a cup of coffee, everyone does their own routines. Yeah. But there's also something you mentioned I want to comment on, is you talked about, there is a stereotype of the writer being the emotional or the drunk, or they're just spilling out. So there's actually, I want to say something about that, is the outer planets are all about these broader collective and transpersonal processes. Uranus, Aquarius is the Noösphere of the big mind that we can connect in. But I also want to mention Neptune and Pluto. We've talked about Neptune, about inspiration and things that are, just inspired and imaginative. And then Pluto is the transmutation of the wounds into gifts. And there is relevant. I love the way that Spirit set it up this way, that we can transmute our pain into a creative gift. And so that is available when we are dealing with emotions or wounded or difficult Pluto transits or anything psychological or emotional. There is the availability to be with that process and transmute the energy into something creative. So loosely speaking, Neptune is kind of like heaven, and Pluto is kind of like the underworld or hell. And both of those proverbial places can be very rich, transformative places. So what I'm saying is that you don't need to be a tortured drug addict to be a good artist.
Right.
Everyone's dealing with their Plutonian wounds, and you don't have to be some new agey contemplative, meditator. Is that we all have ways that we ascend intuitively, and
Yeah.
we all have ways that we go and transmute things from the underworld. But my
Absolutely.
point is that both of those processes are rich for the creative writing.
Absolutely. They're crucial. If you think so much about the artistic process itself, it is a process of alchemy. You are transmuting, either if it's a blank page on the screen, blank page on paper, blank canvas, you are turning this whole process of transmutation that happens, like you start the momentum, and by the end of it, it's completely changed. Whether it's good or bad, doesn't matter. You're going through that alchemizing process. And then the Piscean, the Neptunian realms, diving into that collective conscious, that collective dream state, that sea, it's where like all information, all light, if you want to call it the event horizon, it's everything that's captured at the end of the universe type of thing. It's all there. It's all in that well. All you have to do is just kind of dip in, take a little out of it,
And then another thing I want to mention about the
Yeah.
writing process that's just coming to me that I've seen over the years and, with people is that people tend to be so unnecessarily critical and judgmental, is my view. And they sabotage the process by a lot of judgments
Yeah.
and a lot of self-doubt. And I can never, do that. And there's a lot of negative self-fulfilling prophecy, negative self-talk that people do. And I want to encourage people to observe that if that's your tendency, and have that meditation where you're spacious, but don't believe your thoughts. And it does not have to be perfect.
Yeah.
It does not have to be up to any cultural standard. Is that I have found that the creative process in and of itself is rewarding. You don't need to have recognition from X, Y, and Z. It really is rewarding unto itself. Now, everything else is the icing on the proverbial cake, but the reward comes from simply being in such a alive, vibrant process.
Yeah.
So when we bring in negativity and criticism, it just, really sours it unnecessarily, because what is available is so spacious and multidimensional and open that you got to just be open to it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's a beautiful, well put, and a beautiful reminder. I know one thing outside of the self-doubt, the ability of like not being able to, like, I can't do this, can't do it, the hyperfixation on the end product, right? I feel like that also, it becomes super crippling, and it takes you away. Like, I know we've spoke many times about this, just because we're both writers, we both love this, and we're talking about just the passion and the love for the actual process itself. Like, that's the only way. Like, no one will do it if you're not enjoying it. And what's the point, right? But there is something like rolling into that pure joy, that pure heart space. And it's just, it's a two-way, it's a give and take. It's like you're getting so much rejuvenation and inspiration and love out of it that it's, the thing that's that's the whole journey. That's the whole point. And then, what happens after is out of your hands,
And it does, matter. Things are relevant with creating an audience and promotion and spreading the word and business things. These things are relevant. I'm not very good at them or even interested in them. Those things are valid. So I don't want to negate the validity and importance of those things. But those things have nothing to do with the creative process. They are two
they don't.
incredibly different skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, like you said, not jumping ahead to the finished product and all those issues is important. To stay within the wizardry and the wonder of the creative process, everything in its own time. So like we said, writing's different for everyone, but basically it can be boiled down to those three things: the creative process, the polishing, and then what you do with it after it's complete.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Maybe now it's a fun time to segue into some charts if you're down.
Sure.
Like, I totally want to pull up the Philip K. Dick chart first. Because,
put it up.
So this is the most consistent time, whatever that you have. So we can argue that this is an accurate chart. For me, the biggest thing that hops out here is like the Sag Sun with Mercury and Saturn right there, and then obviously the Aquarius moon. I don't know how familiar you are with his work, with him himself. Like so much of, especially in his later years, was he was downloading had this like horrible toothache, and the person delivering his message had the little Jesus fish necklace on, then opened up the beam of light, hit him in the head, and he had this like Gnosis revelation, excuse me, and just went on to this this crazy downloads of I'm talking thousands and thousands of pages and journals, investigation of just trying to figure out what this mystery is. And it's something he writes about in a lot of his novels, and especially in his later ones, he ties it into Valis, this vast acting living intelligence system and stuff. And you can see that with the Aquarius moon and those.
Yes.
I feel like that. But anything else that pops up to you, for me, those are like the huge, the big things. They're like, oh, good God.
Sure. Well, he's got Uranus on the ascendant.
Oh, Neptune is totally transiting that right now, too.
Yes, it is. Mercury, obviously, is the planet that goes with communication and writing.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's got Mercury conjunct Saturn, and that is the discipline to ground it. So he's got the innate attunement, the Aquarius moon to Aquarius, to the Noösphere.
Yes.
But also what is relevant is the Ceres in the 12th house in Pisces. And that also is connecting to that 12th house, zone of inspiration and intuition, the collective consciousness, so to speak. And then the sun awakening, his development is to ground Saturn, the ideas, into a spiritual purpose, Sagittarius.
Right.
So the sci-fi and the innovative stuff is the Aquarius moon. And then he's really learning to do something much more tangible with Saturn, Mercury. And he was, as far as I know, very prolific.
Oh, yeah, extremely prolific. I mean, he never really got recognized until like right after his death. Like he died, he got to see the cut of Blade Runner before it was released. But talk about Aquarius moon being so precognizant and like just the downloads of the future, like so many films that came up afterward from his works. And he's just basically known for kind of like hinting at reality. And he's not, and he himself is saying like, oh, I'm not trying to predict these things. It's just, what's coming to him. Yeah, I find that fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, also later in life can go at Saturn,
absolutely.
Getting more recognition. Yeah. And now several of his works have been turned into movies. And
he's a household name now. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another major movie that was from one of his books. I forgot what it was.
And short story, there's like Minority Report next as well. The Man in the High Castle was, one of my favorite books. The series, it's a good series, but it's a little exaggerated. Take some poetic license, but it's beautiful. That Venus in Aquarius too.
Yeah, Venus is the ruler of his North Node.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And so what that points to is that the Venus circles back to the underpinnings of the moon, of this creativity, this brilliance, this innovation. And Venus can go with art, and structuring the art is the Taurus North Node, ruled by the Venus in Aquarius. And that's what we see again with the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, to give it structure. So that really is the focus of this chart, with an Earth North Node and with Saturn conjunct Mercury is grounding things that are just floating out there in all of that
out there.
process.
And he has this cool quincunx between Venus and Mars as well that like really helps, I think, create that motivated fire, that little kind of synergy that really can kind of spark that. That's super cool. Should we hop to someone else?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go to Octavia here. I have Alice Sheldon is remarkable, but she's also born in Chicago. That might just be oversaturating of Illinois. So again, I'm a big sci-fi fan, so here we go with Octavia Butler. I'm not too familiar with her chart. I just thought it'd be fun to throw up, so we can both take a moment to look here.
Well, I mean, I'm not that familiar either, but I can tell you what I see is clearly a writer. Gemini North Node, Mercury on the ascendant, ruling it, and Uranus in Gemini, which is conjunct the Sun. So everything about the soul intentions for development, that is the North Node. And then the Sun is a process of awakening, and that also connects him with Uranus and Gemini, with Mercury on the ascendant. So this shows a real major focus on being a writer. Now, the 12th house is what we've been talking about. There's the Sun, Uranus in that intuitive zone. That is what is very available to connect in. And the Cancer Sun is to be receptive, Uranus and Gemini, to the Noösphere of the great big mind that envelops us. So you can ask, okay, why would somebody have such an intention that's so clear? Well, every chart does also speak about karma or patterns where that may not have been available. So the South Node is the karmic patterns from before. And what we see here is what's unresolved or incomplete is creativity, the 5th house. And we have a creative Leo moon, which also is unresolved about wanting to be much more creative. But there's a wound here. Pluto in Leo, also Saturn, historical restriction, limitation, or challenge around the creative process. So for whatever reason, I don't know, we have karma that was stalled, Saturn, Pluto, around the creative process. So hence, we reincarnate to finish the job, pick up on what was left unfinished, and bring it to completion, which is what this chart says. So we're all works in progress. We all are finishing incomplete soul intentions. And it's amazing to see that in any chart. So that's why we see this huge attunement to the writing process, because the karma simply speaks about incompleteness.
Absolutely. And talk about being such a pioneer, being not only a woman in science fiction trying to get published, but a Black woman in science fiction trying to get published. And, and the way she was able to actually pioneer that field is remarkable. That's so crazy point. Right?
Because we have karma around wounding and limitation. So being a Black woman who came of age in the 50s and 60s probably had racism, sexism, and then the ability to resolve that and to be recognized more as the world became more open and accepting and progressive. So one's biography tends to replicate what the karmic patterns are, so we can work through them and complete what is incomplete. I was going to say, it's actually probably helpful to have the frustrations and challenges as a youngster and then stick with it. Saturn, work through it, and then access the brilliance of the Sun, Gemini, in the 12th house.
Totally. And that whole Pluto alchemy of, healing that trauma and wounds and really finding some catharsis through it. It's remarkable. Yeah, it is just really fantastic and eerie and remarkable to see how just the chart makeup just really not dictates, but allows us to blossom for whatever the kind of lessons and just who we were supposed to be in this, this time around, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, another astrological point that I want to make to anyone listening is don't engage in astrological simplifications. You don't need to be a Gemini sun to be a writer.
Right. Or have a Virgo moon.
We're looking at the archetype of Mercury that has outlet through Virgo and Gemini, and Mercury itself can be connected in numerous ways in any charts. I'm not a Gemini, so I've got Saturn in Gemini, and that is my writing signature. But you don't need to be a Gemini sun.
That's a great point. And it's so true. We really do kind of latch onto these all or nothing sort of little signatures, but there's so much more nuance in it too. And even just if, something is transiting a particular sign and it's just hitting up like, our 5th house, and all of a sudden like, oh, we want to, express ourselves this way. And then whoosh, a writer is born. One more?
Sure.
Do you have a preference?
I don't know if you have Stephen King's chart available.
I didn't have it on, but I can load it up real quick.
Because I mentioned King and he's such a prolific author. Okay, this looks right. Okay, so I want to point out a couple things because I did actually feature King's horoscope or chart in one of my books. So he's got the emphasis on the 3rd house, which is the area associated with Mercury and Gemini. He's got the Sun, Venus, and Neptune in the 3rd. So he is grounding again. Virgo, grounding ideas into form. The creative archaeology dig, as he called it, check out his Mercury conjunct Neptune.
Yeah.
That is how to see that. Also, on top of that, he does have Uranus in Gemini, which is pretty tightly square his sun. So the Mercury is connected to the Uranus in Gemini through rulership. The connection to the Noösphere is seen in these ways. Uranus in Gemini with the awareness and presence of the solar energy, the sun, and also Mercury, which rules Gemini, conjunct Neptune, which these outer planets and their associated signs is where we connect with transpersonal inspiration beyond us. So he's incredibly connected into those realms. And like we just saw with that other example, incomplete creativity. He's got the South Node in the 5th house, similar to the chart we just saw, incomplete. Scorpio, something wounded. And there it is again, Saturn and Pluto in Leo. Some wound around the completion of the creative projects. And therefore, the North Node is about grounding things, Taurus, and bringing them to the world, the 11th house. I call the 11th house the world stage. Complete the creativity and bring it to the world stage. And the Virgo sun in the 3rd is to be a very prolific author, which he is. But
I didn't realize he had a square. The Uranus Sun square makes so much sense because he's also another extremely prolific author.
He is. And Uranus square the Sun is, I've got that too. There's a lot of urgency to just be your own individual and do it your way, and to be a lot more self-aligned with your own shtick, so to speak.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. So we see that inspirational attunement there and the incomplete creativity.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Also the 12th house. He's got Mars in the 12th, and I've got Mars in the 12th as well. And that is where we can assert our energies in a selfless way into a much more broader spiritual process.
Right.
I find with my Mars in the 12th, and I imagine with King, from what I know about him, sometimes people with Mars in the 12th, like me and King, don't want to deal with the everyday world. We just want to be left alone.
Yeah, I understand. I have my Mars in Pisces, but it's in the 1st house, not the 12th. But I can totally understand. I just want to, one thing I guess, not so much struggle with writing in particular, because there's just such a discipline and love and joy to swim in those seas. But anything else, really moody with what I want to do with that. It's just like, I don't feel like it then. I'm not in the mood. And it's just, and it really needs like more of a conscious activation and to kind of put into use. Otherwise, I'm not getting out of bed.
Yeah.
Oh,
do we have time for one more?
Yeah, we do. I think we do.
You want to put up Jack Kerouac? Yeah, and this brings in something else that we can mention, is he's got Mercury in Aquarius, which is connected in, Aquarius, Uranus with the Noösphere. But the signature that I want to point out is he's got Mercury square Vesta pretty tightly. That is about a 1 degree. And I want to mention something here, is that Vesta is actually a big deal. Vesta is about our creative process. It is about the sacred process of honoring something. The myth of the Vestal virgins is that they are kind of retreating from everyday society, and they're going to safeguard hence the virgins, and they're going to immerse themselves in something sacred, something that isn't adulterated by the everyday world. When we cleanse, when we purify, when we are able to honor the muse, so to speak, of the process we've been speaking about. I do think Vesta has a lot to do with that. And he's got Vesta square the planet Mercury. Yeah. So the craftsmanship of writing. So Kerouac has a lot of Pisces. He did struggle with alcoholism, and that was a challenge. But what his chart is saying with the craftsmanship of Vesta square Mercury is, yes, you have innovative, brilliant things to share, Mercury and Aquarius. Let's honor the craft by not adulterating it with, like we said earlier, if you're hungover all the time, you're not going to be clear to be a craftsman.
Right.
So that was a struggle that he had with all the Pisces, but he did have the ability to be a writing craftsman, Mercury Vesta, and he did do that to some degree. And we have the works as a example of that. And so Vesta is also an important player about what your sacred craft is. And he's a good example of how it might pertain to writing.
Beautiful example. Yeah, we're going to have to come back on and riff on Vesta because, that's one actually that I haven't got a chance to talk about quite often, to tell you the truth. It's one of my favorites. A little biased to have it, the eighth house conjoined Pluto. So much about my sacred practice is honoring that Vestal flame, lighting the candles for prayer, for meditation, whatever, offering, and really making it a sacred art.
That's what we talked about before.
Yeah.
I've got Vesta in Aquarius.
Perfectly full circle. Oh, right on. What degree Aquarius?
5. It's where transit.
Oh, right on. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's quincunx my Sun and Mercury. Vesta is a really potent asteroid to look at. And I do recommend exploring the major asteroids or even the minor ones too.
Yeah.
Everything's relevant in astrology. We just don't want to get too lost in too many details.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No longer can see the forest from trees. Back to that again. Eric, so thank you so much for coming on. I know anyone out there, if you want to follow Eric's work and check out his readings, and the books are wonderful. Honestly, one of my favorite astrology writers out there. And it's www.soulvisionconsulting.com. And Eric, anything you want to say or put out there, let me know.
Oh, you're asking, do I have any final thoughts?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about any upcoming projects or anything like that?
Well, I'm going to finish this is now inspiring me to finally get it done. I'm completing a book called Seasons of the Moon, which primarily focuses on the progressed moon, but some other things about the moon as well. And it's wonderful material. I just haven't completed it yet, and it really is urgently calling for my completion now, and I'm going to do that. And this is synchronous with getting me back in these issues. So thank you for inviting me, Chris, and you really are lighting my sacred flame around my writing again, because I've been distant from that in these last time frames. So I'm getting back into that and rejuvenating that. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the From Yonder Shore podcast. Sign up, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next transmission at www.fromyondershore.com.